Welcome back to another LEGO City update. Today we're going to be working on this central park. So the first thing I want to do is modify the road plates because there's only 2 studs of sidewalk on those road plates. So what I could do is tile off the interior of the park and increase the size of the sidewalk, but honestly I don't think there needs to be a sidewalk going around the park. So what I'm actually doing is removing the 2x plate and replacing it with 1x green plate and also 1x light gray plate. The 1x light gray plate is going to allow me to add a masonry wall which will frame the park, and then the 1x green plate in the interior is going to match up with the grass plates. Now in the beginning of this video you saw the Spring Lantern Festival in the park, and I'm not sure if that's going to stay there. In fact, I'm not really too sure what I'm going to do with this park. Obviously there's going to have to be all sorts of vegetation and some walking trails through the park. But now that I got the light gray plate down, it's time to move on to laying some masonry bricks. So I think the stone wall is going to look pretty cool. I've got a lot of light gray masonry bricks in my inventory, so I'm able to do the entire perimeter, which is nice. And then I'm going to top those masonry bricks with some light gray tile. I think this is going to border the park quite nicely, and it's also going to divide it from the road and the bicycle lane, which actually goes around the entire park. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm also thinking to myself, what am I going to do with the trails in the interior? Like, are they going to be walking trails? Are they going to be bike trails? What am I going to create those with? Should it be like dark gray or light gray tile? Should it be like cobblestone? I've got a lot of thought that I have to put into this because it's going to take a lot of parts and therefore take a lot of time to fully construct. So there we go. We've updated the road plates at the front of the park, and now we've got to update the rest. And of course, I'm not going to be able to stretch and reach to make these modifications to the road plates in the city. So what I'm going to do is actually extract them all and bring them over to my desk. Some places in the LEGO City are definitely pretty hard to reach, especially when you're dealing with big tall buildings around the perimeter. And working at my desk makes it a lot easier. I've got all the parts right there by my hands. All I got to do now is just rip that 2x layer off and then replace it with the green and the light gray and eventually the masonry bricks and also the tiles. And you'll probably notice that I've got a bunch of stuff on my desk. That's pretty common. Yep, I've been rebuilding the LEGO City in the Winter Village, and there are parts absolutely everywhere in the LEGO room. I'll probably have to sit down for an hour or two and just sort of clean up today because it seems like this mess piles up quite quickly. There is one more alteration that I want to make to one of the road plates, and this one sits in front of the brick bank. I forgot to add the green strip of grass when I redid a bunch of the road plates the other day, so I decided while I'm updating these road plates, I may as well take care of that as well. Okay, it's the exciting time now. We got to place him back in the LEGO City with the freshly updated masonry wall. I'm going to go ahead and do myself a favor and leave the 2x4 tiles that actually tack the road plates together out, because I have a feeling we're going to have to pull these off again. Because you see the crosswalks, I didn't really leave a hole in the masonry wall where people will actually enter the park, but I just got to figure out where my pathways are going to go. I also have to fix up the one-way roads just behind the botanical garden there, and what I decided to do was just replace the 2x light gray plate with 1x light gray plate and then put the masonry wall on top. It just worked out because I didn't have as many studs over there to work with. And then just finish up some tiling up front here, and then the masonry wall going around the entire park is done. When working on the LEGO City, I'm always thinking of different layouts, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a slight change here. I'm going to switch the position of the university and also the construction site because the construction site is taller and it should be backed by the skyscrapers. And then I bring up another skyscraper. It's the Nougat and Trans Blue one. I was like, maybe this can go back in the LEGO City, and I cycle it around with some modular buildings, that being the pet shop and also the downtown diner, and I put it beside that tall construction site and also the Sanctum Sanctorum, and then I shuffle some other modular buildings around as well. But it doesn't really work there. It's too tall and doesn't really blend in with the other skyscrapers. So I'm actually going to swap its position with the detective's office and the vinyl store, which were sort of shadowed by the Avengers Tower. And now it's with all of the other tall buildings. And there's also 8 studs of space on either side of it, giving that Avengers Tower some breathing room. Then I shuffled some more modular buildings around, and I think this actually looks pretty good. And I'm glad to have this skyscraper back in the city. I definitely enjoy making little tweaks to the city layout like that. I actually think this looks much better. The university is back up front and center here. We've got the pet shop and bookshop on either side of it. And then the detective's office, which is actually my first ever modular building. The building that got me into LEGO City building is now front and center, so you can actually see it right beside the Sanctum Sanctorum. And then just on the other side of the Sanctum Sanctorum is the vinyl shop and also the downtown diner. I forgot to mention, when I was cycling modular buildings around the other day, I absolutely destroyed the roof of my vinyl shop, all the parts in the inside of the building, and I've just got to repair that roof. I'm finding that the downtown diner is actually rather difficult to place because it doesn't really
like match well or blend together with other modular buildings. I definitely don't mind this nougat skyscraper right here. The cool thing about this nougat skyscraper is the fact that it's hollow. I don't really know if that's a cool thing. Obviously, if it came apart like a modular building and it had a fully loaded interior, that would be pretty neat. But because it has the trans blue 1x2s as windows, you can't really tell that there's no interior details. So I'm sort of okay with it in the city because when you look at it from afar, you think that's a complete structure. Plus, it sort of looks like the old Sanctum Sanctorum, so I think it sort of belongs with some of these other pop culture related buildings, and it matches the height of the Avengers Tower, the police station, the Ghostbusters HQ quite nicely. And I think having the 8 studs of breathing room on either side of it just looks good, right? And we can probably create some stories within those alleyways, which will happen when I get back to placing all the minifigures that have been sort of displaced from the city back into the city. One thing that I really like about the placement of that skyscraper there is the angle, or is this angle over here as well, because you can see it sort of peeks out over top of the Ghostbusters HQ between the Daily Bugle and also the Avengers Tower. So it just sort of adds some more depth to the skyscraper region or skyscraper block of the Lego City, and I really like that. So I think that might stay there. I'm really happy with it. I'm not sure if I'll put any of the other skyscrapers back in this city, but I'll definitely keep those constructed for the future when we potentially expand. Then this park here, yeah, it's definitely looking a lot better. We've got that masonry wall built around the entire perimeter, so that's pretty sweet. Once again, I'll have to bust some walls down right here and just have like an entrance into the park. And I'm thinking maybe what I should do is actually match the pathway of the botanical garden. So how I did that was actually based it with tan plates. So there's 4x4 tan plates underneath or larger. And then I put the quarter round dark gray tiles in a uniform pattern like that. And it's sort of cool because you can see the tan pop between the tiles, and then the quarter round tiles just look good when they're all in the same direction, orientated the same way. So maybe what I should do is match that, and wherever there's a crosswalk here, have a trail that leads in and sort of weaves through the park. And then there is another crosswalk over there, so I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with that crosswalk leading into the park, or I could just remove that crosswalk on either side from the road plate so I don't have to deal with that. But maybe there should be 4 entrances to the park because we'd have one there, and then of course 2 in the back. The trails are sort of like tripping me out. I don't really know what I want to do in this park. I did remove the Spring Lantern Festival. I haven't put it back yet, but maybe there needs to be some elevation. There definitely needs to be a lot of vegetation. There needs to be some park benches, maybe some water features, right? Yeah, I've really got to give this some thought. Maybe there should be like a fountain somewhere. Just where do I start? That's the hardest part about most Lego projects is where do you start?
But to answer that question, I always start with a good old-fashioned desk cleanup, because how am I supposed to work on projects when there's unsorted parts absolutely everywhere? So I decided I better sort this big bin of parts. I always sort parts the exact same way. I sort them by part type on my desk, so I remove all the tiles from the plates, I isolate all the plates, all the brick, Technic pieces, connectors, and sort of just group them on my desk in the same way that I organize them in my part system. And then once I have them all sorted into their different categories, I file them away. It's funny though, when you sort, I find it goes really fast at the start because there's so many of the same part type. So there's a lot of 2x2 bricks, or there's a lot of 1x gray plate, or a lot of 2x gray plate. So you can sort it really quickly. But then by the end of it, there's more varieties and it slows right down. The other day when I was working on the new Lego City layout, I decided to remove a bunch of the large vehicles just because they were overcrowding my streets. I threw them into a box, and I figured, you know what, it's time to store them away into this empty drawer unit that I have, and then I can tuck that underneath the table, and we can hold on to these vehicles for another day when we potentially have a larger spot with a bigger city and more roads. Now that those are all taken care of, it's time to remove some of the things from my desk here, such as the empty sorting containers and excess base plates. Now that my desk is clear, I can start working on the park. So I'm actually going to move all the mills plates over here. There's a total of 8 32x32 base plates. The first thing I need to work on is the entrances by the botanical garden. I've decided, you know what? I'm actually going to give the additional 8 studs on either side of the botanical garden to the garden. It just makes sense. So I start moving some of the vegetation away from the garden. Then I start messing with the mills plates so that I can actually align a path with those crosswalks on either side. So I've just got to mess around with these mills plates until I can get that aligned, because it's actually inset 2 studs. So you get the 2 studs of green on the right and then the 4 studs of tan, because that's what I'm going to base my path on. And then there's 2 more studs, and then I can continue with the standard mills plate using the 4x4 green plates. Once I get one side done, I've got to do the exact same thing on the other side, because I think I'm actually going to make this park symmetrical. There's just something about Lego and symmetry, and I just think that they go really well together. So I think that's going to look pretty cool, and the next thing I need to do is lay a whack of these quarter round tiles. And you know what? I decided that I'm going to do the entire park like this here. So it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and also tiling for the remaining paths throughout the park. So I've decided that I'm actually going to pause this time lapse, just because when you're doing trial and error, it doesn't really time lapse that well. And also you're going to see a lot of tiling. But let's take a look at what I've got done so far.
I'll leave the vegetation till last just because it sort of gets in the way, but after completing the new pathway here leading up to the botanical garden, I decided to create this one. Yeah, tons of 1x1 little tiles later, and they're all orientated the same way. Actually, they sort of switch. Switch right there and switch right there, and that matches the pathway around the botanical garden. So what I did was just carved out the mills plate. I took 8 studs out right here, so 2 4x4 plates, and now I'm having this path sort of wind through here. If I didn't do that, then it would look rather like square, right? With like right angles, it wouldn't look as good. So I'm thinking that looks pretty neat. Now I want to add something to the center here, and I'm thinking a giant fountain would look pretty cool. Now I've constructed some fountains in the past, but I want this one to look a little bit different, and I want it to be giant. So I've started constructing something on this 32x32 plate here. I think the center fountain thing is pretty neat. I use like the triangular shaped plates and some of those odd shaped bricks. It's nicely tiled off with some triangular tiles. Then I added some circular elements to the top there, and I think that might look pretty cool, right? And then I gave the base layer an interesting shape as well with these pieces. I would like to use these, but I could only find 3 of them. But that would make it look even cooler, I think. But I'm just building it on this plate here, and then my plan is to embed it into the mills plates. And I'll probably make this one big chunk. So these 4 plates will be one big chunk. I already attached those 2. I may as well just attach these ones as well, just by changing up some of the underlying brick in the mills plate. And then this will be one chunk as well. But I think a giant fountain in the middle there might look pretty cool. Also, I might go around and add green plates around the path so you can't see the tan. I think that's sort of distracting. I did something similar back here, and you can barely tell, right? That plate is actually on top of a tan plate. So maybe I need to use 1x and 2x green plate and cover up all of this tan around the path. The next thing I decided to do is actually embed the start of the fountain. And this plate right here that I'm basing the fountain on is going to do a great job of actually attaching all 4 base plates together. So now that it's embedded, I've got to go around and fill in this area, and I'm going to be able to fill in these corners here by using these triangular plates. They're actually the same triangular plates that these weird shaped pieces are sitting on, just in green. There it is, framed and tiled off. Unfortunately, I am out of the light gray triangular tiles, so I put some dark gray ones on the corners, but I actually don't think that looks too bad. Now I need to figure out how I'm going to add my water, and also how I'm going to place this in the center and have water around it, if I choose to stick with that design, of course. Well, it turns out I did have 4 of those odd-shaped bricks, and I decided to use them on my fountain here. I raised it up 3 more layers, actually 4 more layers, because I've got another layer of brick right there. But I did it with that odd-shaped, like, plate. Was that an octagon? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I did with the octagon plate there, and then those odd-shaped bricks, then a layer of the rounded bricks, right? The ones where you put 4 of them together, it creates a circle, and then just put a square on the bottom of it. And then I put another square right there, and you'll see some random trans blue bricks there. When I place this down, I've created this for my water, and it's going to go right around the fountain, and that is pretty much the exact shape of the fountain, or like the water that goes around the central fountain. So this should drop in there and look pretty cool in the end. And plus, I decided to lift it up using these 1x2 bricks. I wanted there to be more depth for the water, and I'm thinking maybe I'll be able to add some fish down there as well. So there's my fish and also a few frogs. And now I'm going to place my water over top. Ideally, I should use like the 1x2x5 panels because you're going to be able to see through better. But we do know the fish are there. You can see them. I just don't have enough 1x2x5 panels, and I don't know. I sort of like this. It's different. It gives the water a nice texture, right? And then I should be able to take my fountain here and place it between all that. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but there we go. And now we have a pretty cool looking fountain. Like, that is some water that looks like pretty authentic, right? I like that. But now how do I create moving water? I've always struggled with this. Like, when I have some water coming out of the top there, how do I make it look like the water is running down? I've really struggled with that. I don't know why. Like, I can use like any of these trans blue elements here. Of course, I can use like the water that looks like flames, like the stuff that would come out of the end of the fire truck. But how do I add like moving water coming down? It's always very difficult. Sometimes I've like snot mounted tiles or used brackets and put like blue tiles coming down, like trans blue tiles, but it just never really looked that good. But I'm definitely liking the start of this fountain. Well, not really the start. We're almost done at this point. Like, I honestly don't know what piece to use. Like, this looks good on the top there. I think that looks like an authentic water spray. Like, you could maybe use these claws to make it look like there's water coming down, but then how do I clip them in position so they don't look too bulky? Like, whatever I clip them to might take away from the look. I could use snowflakes. No, I'm just kidding. But like, even this, it looks sort of tacky, right? Like, it's sort of hard to create moving water with Lego. At least I struggle with it. Maybe there's like a better part that I don't have, but I'm looking at all my trans blue stuff and just don't really know what to use. Like, what are these? Like bionicle shoulder pads or something? Maybe have those on there. It just sort of looks bulky and strange, and maybe I just need to put like a bunch of studs all over this thing, you know, like just cover it with studs. After trying a bunch of different pieces to create that moving water effect, I'm just going to go with the assumption that moving water is transparent and there doesn't have to be anything there to represent it because nothing looked good. But I did add some elements to the fountain to break up its sort of monochromatic feel. So you got some like metallic pieces there. I think that looks pretty good with the horns and like those little fancy 1x1s. Also, got rid of all the tan, and doesn't that look better? I know this is one plate higher, but it's like nature, right? Eventually this is going to be covered with all sorts of leaf elements and benches and bushes and trees and flowers, and there's going to be all sorts of color here eventually. And also I'll probably add more texture using cheese slopes and slopes, just like I've done in some of the other green spaces throughout the Lego city. So that's looking pretty good. And check it out, I decided to go through the botanical garden there and re-add all of the flowers, and I also made some additions as well. So you got some pink flowers, some yellow flowers, some purple flowers, the bench there, some of these flowered trees, and also the seaweed trees right here, which are actually from the Sanctum Sanctorum. I thought those looked pretty good. You got some pink flowers back there, and then all sorts of flowers on the little leaf elements behind this bench, and it's the same on either side. I think that looks pretty cool, and I'm ready to test fit this in the Lego city. In addition to placing it, I also decided to make 2 mill plates for the front here because I don't think the Spring Lantern Festival is going to go back there. I just want to create a huge park. I also modified the masonry wall. So I started the path right there with the tan plate and also the quarter round tiles. I'll have to figure out how this is going to connect to the other path. I think these two will probably just come through here, same sort of design, meet up in the center, and then make their way that way, and then we can have other things in these 3 different quadrants. What that's going to be, I haven't quite decided yet, but I'm really happy with the fountain, the path going around the fountain, and also the updated botanical garden, right? Yeah, that looks pretty sweet. I also modified the masonry wall on the right side, right? And also on the left side over there, just so people can make their way through the botanical garden, sort of across the street and into the Central Park. So there we go, everybody. Really happy with the results so far. I think this just opens up the city beautifully. You can see the modular buildings, and I love the color of the botanical garden and the fountain. I think this is the best fountain that I've ever created. I'm pretty happy with it. I love the water, the fish in there as well, and the central fountain looks pretty neat. And I like the fact that it's embedded in the Mills plate and it has sort of like this odd shape. It really turned out quite nicely. Everybody, thank you so much for coming on by. Please remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for some more great stuff coming out in the near future. Farewell.